In this video, I'll be doing a lab from the Cisco CCNA Gold Bootcamp course from blackbox.com. It's a really good course. I enjoy it quite a bit. And the lab is HSRP Troubleshooting, Hot Standby Router Protocol Troubleshooting Lab. So let's get started. It says HSRP was previously configured on the R1 and R2 routers, and everything was working fine until last night. There was an outage on R1 and all the clients lost network connectivity. Router 1 has been restored, but management are concerned that the issue will reoccur. Your task is to troubleshoot the configuration and ensure that all PCs maintain network connectivity when there is an outage via the router. R1 must be the preferred router when both are available. So it says the exercise is complete when you can shut down interface gig 01 on router 1 and HSRP fails over to router 2. When you bring the interface back up again, HSRP must fail back to R1. And it says note that some commands may be disabled during the CCNA exam, so you should know different troubleshooting commands. For this lab, you must not use the show run command. And it says give HSRP enough time to fail over when testing. And so those are our instructions. So basically, the problem was that a router went down. It sounds like HSRP is not configured correctly, because once we can shut down an interface on R1, have it fail over to R2, bring interface back up, and have it go back to R1 as the active router, we've completed our lab. So let's start with, this is our HSRP virtual IP address, 10.10.10.1, which will be the default gateway for the PCs, both of them. So let's see if we can even ping that. So 10.10.10.1, and we're getting a reply there. That's good. PC2, let's go to the command prompt, 10.10.10.1, and we're getting a reply there. So that's a good first step. Let's look at the configuration for HSRP, and we'll go to router 1, and we're going to pull up the command line. And for that, we need to go to enable, and we're going to do a show standby command. And right now, we see on router 1, it's group 1 version 2. The virtual IP address is 10.10.10.1, which is correct. It's got a virtual MAC address ending in F001. It says preemption is enabled. Okay. Active router is local, so router 1 is currently the active router. For some reason it says standby router is unknown. I don't know why that would be, but we're going to find out. It has a priority set to 110 for router 1. So that has been manually set at some point because the default priority is 100. And that's probably everything. So we know we have an issue with the standby router, which will be router 2. So let's go look at the configuration on router 2. And the command is just show standby. And on router 2, we have group 1. Open this up a little bit. Virtual IP address is 10.10.10.2. That's not correct because this should be our virtual IP address .1. The MAC address, virtual MAC address AC01. It's also saying version 1. And on router 1 it was version 2. And they have to match. They have to be the same version to work. Preemption is enabled over here as well. Active router is local. So on this side, router 2 believes it's the active router. And let's look over here at router 1. And router 1 also thinks it's, so here's router 1. It's showing itself as the active router. Router 2 is also showing itself as the active router, so that's not right. Priority is 120 on router 2. So that has been manually configured at some point because the default is 100. And this is a higher priority than router 1. So let's start by fixing router 2. We need to change the IP address for the virtual IP address. So let's do that. Let's go to on router 2, we're going to do conf t, and then we're going to go interface, gigabit Ethernet, and we want to work on 01, that interface. And we want to, I don't know if I have to do a no command to get rid of that. So I'm going to do that. We're going to issue the no standby group 1 IP of 10.10.10.2 is what it was showing up here, and that's not correct. So that should take care of that. Now we're going to issue the standby command group 1, and it's going to be IP 10.10.10.1, 10.10.10.1. So that issue should be fixed. And we want to also change the version, because router 1 is showing version 2, and router 1 is showing version 2, router 2 is showing version 1, so we need to change that. And so the command is standby and then version, and then we're going to go with 2. So they're both the same. They have to be the same. All right, and so that should, let's I made a typo. I'm going to fast forward just to get past that. So let's do the show standby command. Now in router 2, we see version 2 is set. We have the correct IP address for the virtual IP address. There's the MAC address. It says preemption disabled. Active router is 10.10.10.2, which is router 1. Standby router is local, so R2 sees itself as a standby router. It has a priority of 100, which is the default. And on router 1, if we look at that, we'll see that the priority is configured to 110. So router 1 should be the active router with preemption enabled. Preemption on R2 is disabled, so that all looks good. And R2, everything looks pretty good, because let's go back. It says the exercise is complete when you can shut down interface gig 01 on router 1 and HSRP fails over to R2. So that tells us we want router 1 to be the active router and router 2 to be the standby. And then it wants us to bring this interface down on router 1 to see if HSRP fails over to router 2, the standby router. And then when you bring the interface back up again, HSRP must fail back to router 1, which means preemption needs to be enabled on router 1, and it looks like it is. So we have the active router is router 1, as you can see there and there. Standby router is router 2. That all looks right. So that looks good. I think what we need to do is go ahead and try bringing down the interface. The exercise is complete when you shut down. Okay, so let's go conf t, and on router 1, we're going to change. Actually, no, we're going to bring down the interface. So 01, and we're just going to issue the shut command. And it can take a minute for all this to go through. So we're going to fast forward in time like a couple minutes in Packet Tracer. And so let's see if, since we brought this interface down, now the routing should be going through R2. R2 should become the active router. So let's pull that up and show standby. And now we see active router is local, which is router 2. Yes. Standby router is unknown. And 10.10.10.1, that looks good. So we shut down interface 01 on router 1, and HSRP did fail over to R2, so that worked. And when you bring the interface back up again, HSRP must fail. Let's make sure that everything is routing over to still working now. So let's go to the PCs and ping the default gateway of 10.10.10.1, which is the virtual IP in HSRP. So we get an ARP, probably request timeout, but then it's working. So that's good. Let's do the same on PC2. What we got to do is up arrow for the previous command. And we will see if it pulls out a success. Yep, it's successful. So that's good. And now when you bring the interface back up again, so we've completed this part. We shut down the interface on R1. It did fail over to R2. That's working. Now if we bring the interface back up, we want R1 to revert to the active router status. So let's do that. Let's bring up, and we're going to do interface gigabit Ethernet 01 on router 1. And we're just going to issue the no shut command. And then in packet tracer, you can go forward in time by 30 seconds a pop. And I'm going to do that just because it takes a while sometimes for this all to get pushed through. And let's end. And let's do the show standby command. And then let's see if router 1 became active again. So there's the correct IP, and active router is local. Standby router is 10.10.3, 10.10.10.3, which is router 2. So that's good. So that's functioning. And then router 2 should be showing router 1 is the active router. So show standby. And yep, looks good because right here it says standby router is local. So that would be router 2. Got the correct IP address. So that all looks good. Active router is 10.10.10.2, which again is over here, router 1. And so the exercise is complete when you shut down the interface gigabit Ethernet 01. We did that. HSRP did fail over to router 2. We did that. Excuse me. When you bring the interface back up again, HSRP must fail back to router 1, which it did. We can see here that it's back to being the active router. And that looks like we've completed the lab. So this was an HSRP troubleshooting lab from the blackbox.com course. And we'll see you in the next video.